Mr. Sean Katona, welcome to the REI Diamond Show. How you doing today?
I am awesome, Dan. Good to be with you. I'm excited for today.
Yeah, long-awaited episode. I remember we're trying to get it on the schedule now for, I don't know, probably a year. And
Yeah,
then
we
and
have
then
to go through your agents, your assistants. There's a 9-month wait list. I mean, this is
there
like
is.
getting on the Tonight Show.
I was like, oh my gosh, I looked at the calendar. I'm like, oh my God, that came quick. I felt like it was so far away when a booking first came through, but here we are.
Yeah.
So Sean, let's start with the origination story of the listeners. We're going to touch on commercial real estate, retail, mostly specifically today. But let's talk about how you got started in the real estate business.
Awesome. Just realizing, did my camera just freeze?
Yeah, I think you're frozen.
Here, I can possibly toggle that. Um, let's see. That's not a good look. And we're back. Hopefully that doesn't do that too many times. All right, we'll just play through or we'll edit through that. But my story began in corporate America. I think like a lot of people, go to school, get a good job, and then found myself just kind of stagnant, bored, but had saved up maybe 50 grand. And I was like, hey, what am I going to do with this money? Chose to invest it in real estate because I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I think like a lot of people out there. And I think what comes organically to most people is, oh, I'll go buy a rental house, which for me turned into an accidental flip because it was cash flow negative. And then I made a little bit of money on that. I was like, hey, this could be a thing. If I did a few of these a year, it almost would replace, my salary. And at the time I was working at Microsoft, but I was enchanted by, the freedom and the unlimited upside potential. I could do, dozens of deals a year in theory and be making 7 figures instead of 6. So that fascinated me.
Nice. So you were doing house flipping at the time, and you got up to a pretty good volume. I mean, how many years was that you flipped houses before you transitioned to commercial? And maybe like what was the last year or two where it was like, hey, this thing's a big thing before you started to wind it down?
Yeah. Okay. So I think I bought my first house in 2010. I was probably 25 at the time. And then in 2012 or 13, I said, you know what, I'm going to make a run at this full time, walked away from corporate America. And at the time, I think I'd saved up about 100 grand. I maybe had a couple rentals in portfolio. But I had found some coaches and mentors that really showed me a way to like systemize, scale, and grow the business. And so I think that gave me a lot of confidence. And I was like, hey, this is showing some signals that this could work and could continue to scale and grow. Fast forward to maybe 2015. And my business roughly doubled each year. I think I went from doing like 6 deals to then 12 to one point. I want to say we had 15 rehabs going simultaneously with 3 different GCs, all of them overpromised, underdelivered. I think they were, running over budget. And I was just like, wait a minute, I feel like an adult babysitter. And that was kind of my breaking point. And it got even worse because as I was winding down some of the residential business, I ended up losing 100 grand back to back on 2 deals. And I was like, wow,
Mm.
that just brought me to a grinding halt, both financially and mentally, and from a confidence standpoint. And it almost forced me to get serious about commercial, where it's like, I got to go make, 500 grand to $1 million so that I can get caught up with my private investors. And wait a minute, the whole point of this real estate journey was to create some passive income and some cash flow. And I got so quickly distracted with the wholesaling side of the business and the rehabbing side of the business. And it was like, those quicker pops and those bigger hits versus the steady income producing. And that became more of my focus, was the active income versus that cash flowing side. So shame on me for that. But um, in some ways, I've been guilty of that on the commercial side too. I've flipped, maybe 5 or so shopping centers now for what would be, 10 years of cash flow realized all at once. But that, built the resume and that got my investors some great returns. And it kind of showed some proof of concept and some wins and gave us some good capital to go work with and credibility in, Phoenix, the market that I work in, and being able to say, hey, I've bought and sold a handful of 7-figure deals where, we bought them right and we almost doubled the value in a lot of cases. So that's been my journey. And, if you fast forward to today, I think I've I've still got 4 properties in portfolio. We just recently sold one. I've got 3 or 4 vacancies I still want to get filled up, and then I'll have the fun decision of, do we test the market and sell these for some sweet gains, or do we keep them in portfolio? And that'll be the fun decision to make.
So you've gotten out of 5 of these retail centers. These are what, like roughly maybe 25,000 feet, maybe a little larger each?
Yeah, right in there is probably my average. I've bought 20,000, 23,000. The former drugstore was 16,000. I bought a little tiny church that we did okay on. I've got a brewery that's about 7,000 feet. So I think, I'm less worried about the size of it now. And what's becoming more important after buying, maybe 10 of these, is the quality of it. And I think, like, we know in the house flipping business, you probably want to buy the worst house in a good neighborhood. Very similar, I think, philosophy would apply to commercial or retail. Like, I want the underperforming strip mall in an otherwise healthy retail corridor.
So what exactly is the quality then, right? If we're looking for the complete shack, rundown house, some of my issue, Sean, right now that I notice is like, if it's not 60% vacant, I like hardly even look at it. And I think that's a downfall because you can get your hands on something that's 100% occupied with low rents and really dig in. And I'm like, oh no, this is not at the bottom enough. Like, and I kind of have these blinders on where I feel like
Yeah.
I'm looking for too low of quality. So can you kind of define quality?
Yeah. I mean, that's such, it's probably going to be the highlight of the podcast, right? Because if you can get this right, it is such a valuable skill. And we're always working to hone and develop it. Like, people who can quickly distinguish, this isn't going to be worth my time to really break down this deal and submit an offer on it, versus this is something that has true potential. It's underperforming. And I think I started out with almost that like singular dimension where, hey, if it's not half vacant, it's not worthwhile. But that might not include the opportunities like, well, what if I could pick it up with 10% down seller financing and still end up with an amazing cash on cash return, and not even have to syndicate this deal out to friends and family and partners, and own a $5 million shopping center for 500 grand out of pocket. And, I'm getting a 18% cash on cash. Like, I'd be okay paying a high price per pound and not having a lot of vacancy or even a lot of rent upsides, because that's just a killer deal. One of the things that I think about a lot now is, can I turn this deal into a 10 cap if I'm going to buy and hold it? So like the drugstore deal that you're familiar with, Dan, is a good example. We're going to be into that deal for about 3 million bucks after you include the purchase price and the renovation and the TI costs and the leasing costs. But it's going to be throwing off about 300 grand a year of base rent. It's essentially pure profit. So that's a 10% unleveraged return. If I've got good debt on there, which I do at 5%, now my cash on cash is quite compelling. So I like those as buy and hold, especially as their quality. Um, I think I omitted part of the answer there too. And what makes a good deal is some of the key things in retail. So, am I getting it at a good price per foot? Is my price to rent ratio going to be compelling? Is there good traffic? Is there good visibility? Is there good access? Or here's another example that maybe I even often forget to think about. Is this property currently at 40% below market rents? You take my market, like Phoenix, for example. Rents have been rising 8, 9, 10% per year in retail. And if you've got a 5-year-old lease that was done, there's a pretty good chance that you're 40% below market. So maybe you renew those tenants, maybe you can get them back up to market rent, but you could potentially buy a full property and get 30, 35, 40% boost in rent. In theory, that could increase the value of the property by 30 to 40%. And if I'm getting that kind of upside margin, I'm happy.
Yeah, as soon as I see the full center that the broker brings me, I'm like, it's junk, it's full, there's no upside. I don't look at it any deeper. What would you say, if is there any kind of a shortcut other than maybe a quick CoStar search that you might implement to figure out what market rents might be if a broker brought you a deal that was full today?
Yeah, I mean, I think you if you start to focus on one market, like, let's say you and I have kind of honed in geographically and asset class wise, you'll start to get to know the rents. Like, what certain neighborhoods in Chicago trade at, probably without even looking it up because you've done it so many times. In the beginning, you're having to spend a lot more time, let's say, looking on LoopNet and going, all right, what's the property across the street renting for? And what's the property around the corner renting for? And like, what am I going to list my rent at to be competitive, and am I the best value in the neighborhood? And sometimes brokers will report, the rental comps. Often they won't, but I think to see what someone's listed at is a pretty good directional indicator. And if I'm seeing deals get signed at, let's say, $16 to $18 a foot, I probably want to underwrite my rent at $15 so I can be, a cleaned up center, still the best value, still good visibility, still good traffic. And there's no reason why they wouldn't want to come to my center because they're getting the best value there.
Yeah, and it's probably worth mentioning. So we're both in the Commercial Academy Mastermind, and you often will present your portfolio, some aspect of the deal you're working on, or the deals. And I guess I've been watching yours since 2022. And it's been very interesting to watch your progression when you're talking about things like the traffic pattern and the design of the shopping center and which one of these units is the hardest to rent. And just because it's 15 doesn't mean the one in the back corner is going to get 15. So it's interesting to kind of see the evolution. And I'm like standing on the sideline showing, I'm like, no, I want all that nuance without the price of doing the 9, 10 deals that you'd mentioned here on the show today. And it's like, I
Well,
don't know that you're going to get that.
yeah, yes and no, Dan, because you are getting to learn that through, my lessons learned the hard way and the dozens of us that present. And so every time we get a new deal bought and leased up, you're hearing these things. And so I think kudos to you for finding a group like that where you can compress the learning curve from 10 years down to maybe two. And you're building those muscles of here's how you can add seven figures of value consistently, to a property that you might buy for $1 million or $2 million. I mean, doubling the value of those assets is just wild. I mean, it's crazy that we can do that, and it's a beautiful inefficiency in this real estate business, and maybe commercial even more so, just because the data's gotten a lot better and the tools have too. But there's still so many 70, 80-year-old owners that A, could care less, and B, don't have anyone actively working to bump those rents and manage those properties to their pro forma value. And so it's like guys like us and house flippers and wholesalers and anyone can go out there and locate those deals that have tremendous upside potential.
So when you were doing the house flipping thing, was that also in the Phoenix market, Sean?
No, actually, I'm born and raised in Seattle. Coincidentally, when I took my job with Microsoft, I relocated down to Santa Monica. So I ended up doing deals in both Seattle and Southern California markets. And only after becoming frustrated with those two markets on commercial did I start looking a little bit more broadly up and down the West Coast, which included Phoenix. And that's where I found a bank owned center that I bought from the bank. And that kind of got me going in both that asset class and that marketplace. And I just decided to stick with that. So it was new. And I remember, breaking into that market wasn't a piece of cake because you get on the phone with a broker and they go, oh, well, what else do you own in town? And so not really being able to say, hey, I've got a center or two, you got to sell yourself a little bit in the beginning, but at least I could say I've done some residential transactions and, we've got the means to be able to do this and some history of being a closer, which is really what these brokers are vetting, right? Like, hey, I'm risking, going into escrow with you. Are you going to close, or is this thing going to blow out like the last four dreamers who couldn't get it across the finish line?
Yeah. So you never actually lived in Phoenix.
No, I feel like in some ways an honorary Phoenician because I probably go once a month now, but I'm based in Huntington Beach now, aka Surf City. So it's an easy flight for me, 90 minutes. I've done day trips where I've met a buyer at their due diligence walkthrough and just come home. But what I'll typically do is, go out early that morning, spend one night there, and I get 2 full days in the field to meet with tenants, lenders, vendors, my bankers, my brokers, and I can get a lot done in 2 days. And we can get so much done remotely now too that that's become my workflow.
Yeah, I'm a little shocked because I just assumed at some point you must have lived there. Like what, Phoenix? Our company, Diamond Equity, we had an office in Phoenix, and it was a very tough, constrained single-family real estate market. I mean, the appreciation rate was probably 10% per year, like before COVID hit.
Yeah,
And it was like impossible to get a deal. And from what I understand, Seattle and Southern California are like even harder than that. Um, so I just assumed it was the frustration in the single family market for Phoenix that drove you to go and convert into the commercial thing. It's like, no, you were in even worse areas. And I think that's a frustration that everybody out there right now is dealing with in the single family house flipping business. Yeah, you can find deals, they're not as plentiful as they once were. And we find ourselves compromising more often. So it used to be like 70 cents ARV minus the repairs. That was it. Well, now it's like 75 cents ARV, 75% of the ARV minus the repairs. And it's like we're kind of, from a percentage standpoint, we're compromising and having to pay up to win the deal. Now
yeah,
we are flipping houses that used to sell for 3, now they sell for 5. So maybe we were making 45,000 on a 300,000, maybe we're making 65 or 70 on a 500,000. But we're certainly taking on more risk to
yeah.
do that. What kind of
Yep.
a percentages were you dealing with when you were actually flipping and made some money? Were you doing the math, that way, or maybe another way of looking at it?
Yeah, yeah, and I think I was a little nervous to get into the higher price points, and it was before like the Seattle market just went bananas, kind of pre-COVID. Is I tapered down the residential business in 2015. But I remember, making 60 grand on a flip or 80 grand on a flip, and if I really crushed it, I might make 100. Doing all the construction and spending 4 or 5 months on it. My typical wholesale fee was probably in the 15 to 20K range. But I wasn't doing the crazy level of marketing that you are. So I would get a handful of leads from the internet maybe, and some of my Google ads and pay per click and organic. But it look, it takes a lot of wholesale deals and a lot of house flips to get to the same profit that we can get in a single commercial transaction. And it takes a little bit longer, but like I'm talking, an extra comma and more zeros, 10 times that. And I've got more tax shelter. I've got maybe more sturdiness. I've got 10 different service-based tenants in this strip mall, and so if any one of them goes out, it's not a big deal. Kind of like an apartment building, like it doesn't feel great, but I'm comfortably making the mortgage and then some. So that's part of what helped me get excited about commercial.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I mean, there is a lot of competition in commercial, and we see that. I haven't done a deal with a broker, so I'm in a bunch of deals that other people are running right now. So I'm curious, does it bear out the way some people mention in our group where they're like, hey, it's a little less competition in the commercial space? Or do you feel like you're bid up and bid out the way you are in single family? Or is it the air is a little clearer and there's less players at the table in a sense on any individual deal?
Yeah, well, I mean, here's an interesting way to take an inventory. If we go to our local real estate meetup group, how many people in there are focused on residential versus commercial? I'd probably say 95% of them are trying to figure out how to flip a house or wholesale a house or buy a rental house. And we're probably in the single digits on guys who are like, hey, commercial is my core business. So I got to guess there's substantially less bodies competing for those. And then you got some guys going out and doing multifamily and some guys doing storage and RV, mobile home parks and you name it. And so now how many guys are doing commercial or excuse me, retail? And then there's different flavors of retail. So strip malls. And now it's getting even more like nichey and specific. And like to give you an example, like there's probably in Phoenix 80 to 100 brokers that control almost all the deal flow. and you compare that to how many residential agents might cover a market like Phoenix or Chicago. It's just like, okay, that can give you some sense. And probably the sharpest, shrewdest groups and buyers and landlords, are getting into bigger and bigger and bigger deals. They can't be bothered to get out of bed to only make $1 million on a project. They got to buy something for 10 and, sell it for 15, or something for 25 that can be worth 35 because they got all this overhead and payroll and groups and this and that to feed the beast. So, if you were to get into the $1 to $5 million commercial deals, I think you would find you're not in too many bidding wars, especially if you get into the off market game like you've gotten so good at. It's like, hey, it's just me and a guy at the end of his career whose kids have no interest in owning this asset and operating it because they've seen poor grandpa down here, every other weekend dealing with some nonsense.
Yeah, true enough. The barrier to entry is a little bit higher. So you mentioned a meetup full of people who are trying to house hack and everything else. It's a lot easier for the meetup attendee to go get, say, 150 grand off grandma to like go flip a house and
Yeah.
make a not shrewd decision to pay too much, flip the house, do the whole thing, and then break even or even lose money at the end of the day. Well, that's who you're competing against in the residential space. Whereas in commercial, $2.5 million purchase price. You probably need to put $250,000 or so aside for the roof and the tenant improvements to get the leases signed, sign commissions, the whole thing.
Yep.
Another $500,000 to $600,000 down for the loan, maybe even more. So we're talking about having to raise $750,000 in cash. I'm sure there are some grandmas out there with 750, but it's not going to be the same number that got 80, 100, 150 like you're finding in the residential space. And then
Yeah.
on top of that, the lender is a lot more strict and becomes a little bit of a safeguard. I don't think they're a great safeguard. They don't know the
Yeah.
value and driving the value and all the things that you need to know to be successful in the commercial space. But they're not going to make a completely foolish loan. I mean, I guess in hindsight, there's a lot of completely foolish loans out there as we speak, right, Sean, on the office buildings and everything else. But you got a higher barrier to entry in commercial, so maybe keeps the competition lower, but more sophisticated when you're dealing with it.
I'll, in defense of some of the lenders out there, say that they've, dissected my deals thoroughly, and the guys that lend on commercial know what they're doing. They say, hey, show me the rent roll. They got debt coverage ratio there, how much term is left on it. So, they're stress testing the deal. But, in the first couple of deals that we did, we're still personally guaranteeing those loans. We're signing on it. And so, yes, the asset can support the deal and the loan, but we're here to personally backstop it as well if that doesn't go exactly according to plan. And we've had to step up on a couple of occasions where we did lose tenants or it took a lot longer to lease it up than I thought. But I want to mention this too, because you might spook some people thinking, oh, I got to have $1 million or $500,000 to take a deal down. The first deal that we did, I mentioned that bank-owned one, we got it tied up and in escrow with a $25,000 earnest money deposit. And I think that was the only money that we personally put in because I didn't have a lot of cash at that time, right? Remember, I just lost 200 grand back to back on a couple of house flips. So I got that tied up. That same bank that sold me the deal financed it. I want to say we put 75% debt on it. And then I went to 3 or 4 of my existing private lenders that I'd done residential with and said, hey, you guys want to invest in this alongside with me? So they effectively came up with the $500,000 down payment. Bank, lent about 1.5. We bought it for 2 million. So, we've gotten ownership and control of a $2 million asset for as little as $75,000, or excuse me, $25,000 out of our own pocket. So it is still possible. I think that, I have decent credit. I had decent relationships. And that building goes on to sell for $3.5 million about 18 months later. So you're creating 7 figures of profit for our ownership group. On my 25 grand outlay, the cash on cash return was pretty good. And maybe I only made $7 an hour after I did all that work, but it's still, is a pretty incredible experience for, us as investors and owners and going, wow, this transition from residential to commercial it worked, and this is real. And all of a sudden, like, you know, all that time spent learning a different asset class and a different industry and different brokers and a different market, like, finally paid off and bared some fruit. So I guess to anyone out there listening, like, don't be spooked because you're playing with bigger numbers, because it's fun. The cash flow is bigger, the tax shelter is bigger, and the profit should be bigger, because we're just playing with a lot bigger buildings and a lot more tenants in most cases.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll tell you what, I guess I haven't done my deal and made the million bucks in Commercial Academy personally, but I'm in deals that are, 5, 10, 15 million with profits that are in some cases potentially going to be $10 million plus.
Yeah.
Getting around the people in the group, hearing the numbers, seeing the complete case studies with like real time. This lease is not signed. This lease is on the table, but don't tell anyone because we're not supposed to mention any of the details here. We're under NDA. Um, Being able to get around that's been priceless, and I appreciate the transparency that you've been able to bring when you're presenting and talking about those deals in the group. Aside from that, could we maybe pull on the thread of a deal full cycle, right? Found deal, here's how I financed it, we leased it up, and this is what we ended up doing when we sold it.
Yeah. So I mean, that example that I just gave was my first one. So, bank owned, founded on LoopNet. I think it was listed for 2.6. I closed it for 1.95. We sold it 18 months later for 3.5 million. Created that seven-figure profit. I think I already explained the capital stack fairly well. The business plan, or the value add there, was to go stabilize the rent roll, because almost every tenant was month to month, which made it somewhat scary and unlendable. So we went in and either renewed all those tenants on 5 or 7 year leases, or where we had vacancies, we put new tenants in. And so what we took to market was a stabilized, sturdy, shopping center with a lot of service centric tenants, and it was very lendable for the next buyer. And from a guy who ironically was from Seattle, he's going, "Hey, I'm dealing with these fourplexes up here and hardly making any money, and I can go buy this at a 7.75 cap. Sign me up." So he was happy, we were happy. That created a good win-win. Coincidentally, probably most of my subsequent deals after that were quite similar, and I'll give you the numbers on the second one. So just up the road from where I was in Maricopa, we were in the town of Goodyear. I bought a half vacant center that was shadow anchored by a Walmart. So it had good traffic, good visibility, good neighborhood, growing area, like a lot of the fundamentals that you'd want to see. But the current or previous owner had never built out the spaces, and I don't know if he wasn't offering TI allowance or never found the right tenants or what the story was, but it was effectively a half vacant, 17,000-foot center. Purchased that for 2 million bucks. It was off market. It came with a piece of dirt out in front that could be turned into, let's say, a drive-through or fast food. So that was a nice extra piece. And today I'd love to find that. They're much harder to find now. We got that property filled up, and the strip mall sold for about 4.2 million. The dirt pad out front, I sold separately to a donut shop for 700K. So what's our total proceeds? 4.9 million in sale price. We put about 400 grand into the build outs, the leasing commission. If you're a house flipper, think of that as your rehab cost. So I'm into it for give or take 2.4. It sells for 4.9. Quick math is it's nearly $2.5 million in gross profit. Back out a little bit of real estate commission and fees and other closing costs and whatnot, but that created a $2 million plus profit. And that one was a 14-month turnaround to get those 3 tenants filled up, to get all those other tenants renewed on good leases, do a little bit of improvement around the property. But that's the type of deal that I'm drawn to now. And like, even if I miss the mark widely and it only is $1 million profit, there's a pretty good buffer in there and cushion, if we had to lower rents or everything didn't go quite according to plan. So there's a cradle to grave one, and pepper me with any fire round questions there or details that I left out.
Do you regret selling any of the, I think you said you've gotten out of five now. Do you regret selling any of those five?
You know what is tricky is after you've worked on a deal for a year plus, you get to know all the like dirty little secrets or the things that aren't quite perfect about a deal. And I'm sure there's no perfect deal, but I'll share with you some of the things I've become most sensitive about as I bought more and more of these. And like my buying criteria continues to like get further refined and like I just hope my next deal is better and the next one after that is better. And really what the trend is going towards is better areas. And that can mean a couple different things, but you know, if you have lower crime, if you're not dealing with the homeless folks, if you have better visibility, if you have better access, if you have more density, if you have better signage or the ability to buy better signage, you know, if you've got good frontage, if your center isn't like super deep like a bowling alley, like there's some things that we can fix, but some things that are very difficult. Like I can't change a whole zip code. I can't change a corridor, but I can certainly redo facade, parking lot, signage, paint, and know that I can make this something much better. You know, what I'm more excited about now is maybe a little bit lower returns in exchange for better quality buildings that are going to attract a higher quality tenant. And by that, I mean people that are a little more sound financially. They probably have a higher FICO score when they're personally guaranteeing these loans, or not the loans, but the leases. And then they're in areas with lower vacancy. So, you know, if you're dealing with a market that has 15% vacancy for retail, well, there's a lot of options for people to go, you know, lease a space at. If it's a market that has 3% vacancy, it's in high demand, and the landlord is negotiating that lease from much more of a position of strength in that case. And so I would happily take a 7 cap now versus the 8 or 9 cap for what might be much rougher, tougher areas with rougher, tougher tenants, and even older buildings that have, you know, more antiquated mechanical systems, electrical, plumbing. Like I had to replace damn near the whole sewer system on my Mesa deal, you know, because it's mid 80s and, you know, it was just the thing was falling apart and corroding. It's like, well, I didn't have that 60 grand in my underwriting because I scoped it, but who would have known that it would collapse? Well, something that's that old, pretty good chance you should probably put that into your underwriting or make the decision that you're going to buy stuff that's 1990 and newer. Because guess what? That's still almost 30 years old now. And go for it.
Yeah, so would the strategy, if before your goal is to, I don't know, buy it, stabilize it, flip it, 3 to 5 years, would the goal be something different now when you're more sensitive to these better areas for all those reasons? Is it more of like a let's hold this thing and, let that area's rents continue to mature and grow and kind of let that deal superheat? Like, what is your ideal hold time on that next asset, because you're getting in there now at a 7.5 cap, calling that a good deal, but the area demands and justifies it.
You know what? I didn't even answer your question, did I? So
The regret, I think,
what, yeah, one or two of those
yeah.
buildings I might have wanted to hold, but I didn't have a lot of national credit, really sturdy tenants that I thought, hey, this is almost bulletproof. And in fact, I've had enough of my tenants kind of do midnight move outs or,
Mm.
you know, fail to make rent or just have other challenges where I'm like, I I don't have I'm not willing to make a 5 or a 10-year bet on these guys. Now, transition that to, let's say, the Tempe deal where we just signed Dollar Tree. Okay, now I've got a Fortune 500 national credit tenant with 16,000 locations that's direct depositing it into our account 3 days early every month. That I have a lot more comfort with and confidence. And I think it's going to be something that I can pass down to the kids that's going to be, you know, almost effortless for them to manage or have in the portfolio. So that, Dan, would be the answer to I want to hold more stuff like that. Higher quality tenants. That's a killer property. It's on a hard corner with 60,000 cars a day. It's a more affluent part of town with a over $100,000 average income. So I just think that that thing's going to be great for a decade or longer. I want to hold stuff like that, but maybe the lower quality tenants, those are going to get flipped out, the lower quality buildings, to create a nice payday to then go buy those higher quality buy and holds. And like one of the things that I've said to myself is maybe I should be, buying 3 or 4 of these a year and selling one. So it's like, okay, that puts a nice plop of cash in the bank, but the asset base is continuing to grow. The portfolio is continuing to grow, but you're not always at the mercy of like just living off the cash flow.
Yeah, that makes sense. It is one of my own observations is like flipping houses for 13 years since 2006. I guess it's a little longer now myself. I've always viewed real estate as a game of hot potato. And I got in 2006. So all the potatoes were burning hot at that time. You had to get in and get out really fast. And they did go
Yeah.
down significantly in value. And to your point, tenants moving out of your strip center in the middle of the night after maybe you cut them a check for $35,000 to install the kitchen and the tables and their little taco restaurant or whatever it was. And then they bolt, and now you're stuck with maybe you got to write another $20,000 check or 50 to a massage parlor that's going to yank all that stuff you just bought right back out of your center again. It's kind of like, you get this collection of 8 to 10 or 12 or 20 tenants, however many is in there, and the potato is hot. And it's like, are you really going to hang on to this thing and let the leases burn off, or do you turn around and sell it at some point? And I'm attracted to the hold everything forever philosophy, maybe because I look around and see the 60, 70, 80-year-old guys who have paid off their stuff that they bought at ridiculous bases before the cap rates ever compressed to the point that we're at now here today.
Yeah.
So I think the game is different than when a lot of those owners had acquired these assets. But I struggle with that. And hot potato wins. Let's, musical chairs, find someone else for the seat. Let's go ahead, sell it quick,
Yeah.
stabilize it, sell it quick. I don't know if I have the temperament for the long-term hold. And yet there's other people who will be like 10, 15 years in, especially like you're talking about, Sean. 100K a year household income. The area is prime and the rents continue to mature, and that land is worth, the land the center is on is worth 5 times what you paid for it 10, 12, 15 years out. It's not even based on the cash flow anymore. So you do find the right deal and you hold that as a legacy exit. I see how that could make sense.
It's an interesting, I don't know if we call it a philosophical decision, a business plan decision. I remember hearing Strip Mall guy who sat down with Charlie Munger, and he was like, "Hey, you need like we have a very similar business model, right?" He was flipping a lot of stuff out, but Charlie was like, "You need to figure out how to hold everything." And it's like the example of Berkshire. It's like, well, they own Coca-Cola at like this cost basis that's redonkulous, and it's still paying out the dividends, even though the stock's worth 10 times that now. Um, and it's like really over the last 3 or 4 deals that I bought, I think we've shifted a little bit mentally, or maybe gotten older, or a little more patient. It's like there's enough of a cushion in the bank to say, hey, let's focus on stuff that we want to hold for longer, and that's refine the buying criteria a little bit. And if you tallied up what you're paying in taxes on the capital gains and what you're paying the broker's commissions on the exit, and you keep subtracting that out of like what you're putting, like, yeah, it starts to add up. And that's why you see these guys do 1031s for, throughout their whole career. What's kind of sad about that is they never really get to, I feel like, enjoy the payday. um, but if you're able to be patient and just live off the cash flow, or let's say the cash out refinance proceeds, which are tax, it's not a taxable event, so you're able to access some capital that way. That patient play is, I mean, look here, if I had 10 centers now and they had paid down the loan balance on all those, that'd be pretty sweet. Granted, I might have lost my mind and gone crazy dealing with all those tenants and all that move out, but who knows? You can always raise more money. You can always, find more debt. Like I don't think we're constrained by, I need this cash to go do more deals. Like those are skills that can be developed, so that we can continue to build and grow if you're willing to take on partners. I mean, like one of the other things that we've been thinking about as a family is like, or do we want to take some of what we're earning and not have partners on these deals? So we're not doing K1s at the end of the year, and we don't have to answer to everyone, and I don't have to do quarterly investor reports. And that's a little bit more of a simple way to do it. It's more of a lifestyle play versus trying to build like an empire. But hey, I've got 5 quality assets now that are ripping cash flow, and I don't have to answer to anyone. And this is just going to crank out 100 grand a month, for the foreseeable future. And we've got 3, 4, 5% rent bumps built into all these leases. Like I could feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, true enough. You kind of have two models there. You have the syndication model that builds your cash pile, and then you have your estate, if you will, that you build up on the personal side.
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah. Would you mind touching on so one of the deals, it seemed like you were in a little bit of pain talking about this at some points along the way, and now you're in a state of euphoria, and it was a shift to be able to like watch you go through that, and I'm happy that you're in the state of euphoria right now. But would you mind kind of giving the broad strokes of the Dollar Tree deal that we touched on a little bit throughout the episode?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's become probably the favorite piece of property that we own now. And it's for some of those reasons I mentioned earlier. It's on a great corner in a great neighborhood with great visibility and access and parking. And now we've got a great tenant occupying 10,000 of the 16,000 foot space. So I think we always knew it was great real estate. There was a lot of questions and concerns like, did we overpay for this? We bought a vacant drugstore. It was a kind of like a former CVS that actually Walmart had put a grocery store in at one point. And a broker brought it to me as it was falling out of escrow from another buyer or developer. And he said, hey, this guy couldn't get his plan executed, or the city or the neighbors overturned it. So we're going to go back out. He's just going to sell it, leave some meat on the bone. We bought it for 2.65 million. I got traditional bank financing on it, which is crazy. Vacant building,
Wow.
no income, but they believed enough in me, and they absolutely demanded that my wife co-sign the loan as well. So, two folks with decent income and good credit to backstop the loan. But here's where the drama is. No tenant. Let me fix my camera again. It's the blessing and the curse of the DSLR here. I had bought that deal and had a 60-day due diligence period before going non-refundable. And in that time, we got far along enough with a tenant where we were in the 6th round of redlining the lease. And the tenant rep sent over the commission invoice for the deal that was about to be inked, like almost like, hey, I know I'm a day ahead, but here you go. Like they're signing tonight. Okay. Next day, the deal is scheduled to go hard, 50K non-refundable. And I was like, hey, I don't have my lease yet. I'm taking a little bit of a risk here. Like, I don't really want to buy a vacant building without any, tenant in my back pocket. That's a little bit more risk than I like to take. But I thought, like, what are the odds that this thing blows out? But it does. They get cold feet in the 11th hour. That lease just terminates. They basically ghost us. Like we're all sitting there kind of wondering what the heck happened. And it was a medical business that was concerned about the insurance proceeds being paid for that neighborhood or their tenants. Anyway, long story short, back to the drawing board. Now I'm hard. Decided to move forward and close it, which was risky and maybe stupid in hindsight. And I certainly wouldn't recommend that to anyone doing their first deal. But we had said, hey, we have enough saved up to really carry this property for a long time. I overraised on the equity to be able to cover some of those carrying costs and kind of set expectations with my investors and partners who came in on the deal. Then we got in bed with a car wash, and the car wash required a conditional use permit. City approved it. This car wash company is prolific in Phoenix. I think they had private equity backing. They had the best attorneys, lobbyists in town. They had great entitlement people and zoning, and they had the whole team. They get it through the city approves it. The neighbors manage to overturn it. And they basically blocked us from being able to do the car wash. Meanwhile, that took 11 months to get that
Wow.
process rejected. So now, effective my interest only period on the loan has burned off. We've burned through a lot of the cash reserves. We're still paying property taxes. We're paying insurance, and it's getting to the point where, I'm freaking out. My wife's freaking out. Our investors, I think, are getting kind of frustrated. They're like, oh, you keep saying, you got this deal and then you got the car wash deal. And meanwhile, we've got no tenants, no prospects, no income. And, we're going to be at least a long time away from this thing coming together. So kind of getting the fatigue and the frustration, the not so fun part, or the realities of buying a vacant building. Like it can take months or years to lease up a vacant space, and these drugstores are a little funky, right? They're kind of deep, they're kind of big, and how many users need 16,000 feet? We got a lot of offers from schools that came in, but they all wanted complete custom build outs, where the landlord is taking most of the risk. And then there was complexities with, like, can you fit a playground in there? So there was never a deal that came across our desk that was just an absolute slam dunk, no brainer to take it, until Dollar Tree came. And that deal got signed, and through their real estate committee, with them taking the whole building, only to have it blow up after real estate committee. And they said, hey, we stress test the deal, and the rent to sales ratio just doesn't pencil. What I come to find out later on, as we really dissected it, is they just didn't need that much building. 16,000 feet is more than what they need. And you don't really get any credit for sales beyond, let's call it 10 or 12,000 feet. It's just like the point of diminishing returns. So we ended up reworking that deal and basically going all back through the process over again, to get it to the point where they would just take 10,000 feet of the building and we would have 6,000 feet left to remain. So through the course of this, I am in debt coverage default, because I promised the bank that we would have it leased up in 18 months. Fail that test. We're having to do loan modifications along the way. They're asking us to pledge 10% of the loan value and basically put that in a lockbox. And they're just down my neck the whole time. I'm hearing from tenants, excuse me, not tenants, but rather investors who are like, dude, like, what's going on here? Now 2 years have gone by and we've got nothing to show for it and no, like, prospects. Meanwhile, the Dollar Tree lease takes almost a year from our first engagement with them to the point where they're like committed to the deal and they're spending money and we know that they're for certain moving forward. And then they get their 120 days to build out and open and then commence rent. So I should say from LOI to rent commencement, another 12 months go by. So
Wow.
everyone's sitting here like, you've had almost a 3-year journey on this thing to birth this baby. And only in like the last 60 days have we started to receive some rents on it. And, there was a little bit there that came with Spirit Halloween, but I guess if you're going to do deals like this, set a very long runway for, the lease up period, set aside a ton of carrying costs, make sure, your lenders are going to be comfortable with that. And if not, you've got alternative plans. And, we're still at the point today where I can't access that 10% of the loan that they took until I get back into the debt coverage. And like, we're at like 1.1 debt coverage now, and we need to have 1.25. So I need a very small little lease on the other 6,000 feet. But when that day comes, I'll get all that money back. I'll be sitting on what I think is a 10 cap hard corner in Tempe, Arizona, which is a great neighborhood. And, I think I'll have happy wife, happy life, happy partners, but it was not the 12-month turnaround that I had become accustomed to on some of those, maybe mom and pop strip centers. So that was the terrifying kind of dip in the emotional well-being. But getting that Dollar Tree deal signed means we're no longer bleeding. I think it attracts a lot more tenants. It's a confidence boost, a morale boost. It's a boost to the wallet. It's a boost to the neighborhood, the community. I mean, it's just, getting that lease, and it was worth millions of dollars. And so it completely changed it from, the most painful thing in my life to something I'm now quite proud of and excited about overnight with one lease.
Yeah, very, very happy that money is hitting your account and you're on sort of the other side there. Who found Dollar Tree? Did they just come along from a broker, or did you or your broker do some outreach and have the idea to get this tenant?
Yeah, so I had Colliers bring me this deal, and I stuck with them. They're a great leasing team. They're one of the top teams in town. There's actually two guys and a gal that collaborate on it, and so they split the load on the showings and the calls, and each of them know different tenant reps well in town. So I always had landlord representation from a well-known retail brokerage, and I paid for LoopNet Premium throughout a lot of these years, that kept it well front of mind for the brokerage community and for anyone searching LoopNet for retail space for lease. But Dollar Tree, of course, has tenant reps, and so work with their local rep, Kurt, in Arizona, who said, "Hey, we like this site." He submits the LOI. We get through the initial negotiations with him, and then he takes that deal to real estate committee for further grinding and refinement. And then that's an interesting experience to just see, how it works with a national compared to a mom and pop who might get back to you in 3 days.
Yeah, and commend you for the patience to find the quality, right? I'm sure there must have been some lease from someone who wanted to run an antique, trash recycling store or something of that nature there that you could have kind of popped in there, but you wait for the right tenant, the national tenant, and you say, "Hey, I have this corner at a 10 cap." If anyone knows commercial real estate, you're not buying a Dollar Tree lease with 9.5 to 10 years at a 10 cap. If I had to guess, maybe you could get one for a 7 cap, give or take, in today's market on a brand new lease all built out like that. Is that about right?
Yeah, I would probably
Seven and a
wager
quarter?
that trades between a 6 to a 7 cap.
Okay.
If it maybe just above what the debt is. Because when you see Chick-fil-A's and Starbucks is selling for 4.5 caps, you're just like, what's going on here? But some people are making sense of that. They're in exchanges, they're buying them all cash. They want, to have something that's absolutely turnkey, and it doesn't get much more sturdy, I think, than a Dollar Tree in an area like that. They got a 10-year lease with, I think, 2 5-year options, which is pretty common out in the marketplace now. But yeah, you're right. There was a lot of deals that we could have said yes to that I think would have been risky for us as owners, and certainly wouldn't have the cap rate compression that a Dollar Tree is going to give you. And same goes for the 6,000 feet that are next to them. Do we wait for a mom and pop, or excuse me, do we wait for credit, and a national that's going to give us more cap rate compression, or do you take a mom and pop? Because you sell 300 grand, let's say, in NOI at a 6 cap, and what's this building worth? Close to $5 million.
Do you have a picture you can put up on the screen right now? Is that like a possibility here?
I thought I had it on my virtual background here. See if I can multitask this well enough. There's their new signage up. There's the
Nice.
aerial. We made it out to the ribbon cutting with the kids, which was kind of fun. That was like a mental and moral victory for me. But it was fun too to show. I got a 7-year-old son now, Beckham, and a 5-year-old daughter, Ellie. And it's like, I think they're starting to grasp what dad does for work. It's like, yeah, he's got buildings, and like Dollar Tree pays us rent every month. And this is how we put food on our table and go on vacations and go to Chuck E. Cheese. So they kind of get it.
Yeah, the building looks a lot bigger as I look at the picture again here. For anyone who's in a listen only mode, we have the Dollar Tree on the right. It looks fabulous, by the way, too. It looks like they built this building for that reason. And then we have this like little drive-through area to the left, and that's the vacant 6,000 square foot. And I guess we'll make an ask of the audience if anybody has a tenant rep, national credit tenant, or something of that nature. I felt like a Giordano's for the Chicago's listeners would
Right.
go well there. But maybe not. But you got that drive through there, and that will be the jewel in the crown. Yeah, the crown jewel in the jewel that goes into the crown there will be complete once that 6,000 square feet is leased up, right?
Yeah, well, and ironically, this is one of the complexities with this deal too, is, well, wait a minute, there's not really traditional storefront there. There's like the bastardized piece of this building. And so I think anyone who doesn't need a drive-through is like, kind of get that out of my way, give me storefront, give me more parking. So I started working with the civil engineers to do that. And we made some renderings and actually hired Dollar Tree's architect to say, hey, show me this with more storefront, more glazing, more windows. Maybe we relocate the drive-through to the other side of the building, stack the cars kind of around the back here, if I can manage that demonstration. But that's, I mean, what would you call that? Adaptive reuse. It's like, hey, what do tenants want? There's plenty of 6,000 foot users out there. I don't know that most of them need that drive-through configured the way it is there, but we can update that and make it a little bit better, a little bit more desirable, a little bit more effective.
Yeah, and do you think you might? What if you got like three 2,000 square foot spaces? Would they be a lot? That's your specialty. You fill 1,500, 2,000 square foot tenants in Phoenix left and right, don't you?
Yeah,
Isn't that like
well,
your thing?
there's probably a lot more users that want that 1,200 foot kind of subway size box than the 6,000 foot user. You start to think about, okay, well, how are you going to split that? Is it going to go straight back where you've now got two almost bowling alleys
Yeah, real
that's
long.
100 feet deep by, I don't know, 30 feet wide? Um, could work. That's not crazy, but most people don't want that depth. They want more frontage.
Yeah, it makes
So
sense.
now are you left with, okay, someone takes the nice frontage and then you've really got a bastardized back corner, which could only be a destination tenant who really doesn't need, that frontage or visibility. So that's why I worry about like further chopping that up too much. I think, we've got LOIs with a couple of 6,000 foot users that we're close on. So I think we're going to land one of those.
Yeah, I'm sure you will with the traffic of the Dollar Tree. Co-tenancy there with Dollar Tree is solid. Very cool. All right, you ready for some wrap up questions here, Sean?
Let's do it.
Cool. So, crown jewel of wisdom. Normally, I like to ask, I guess, if you were going back to the beginning of your real estate career, we'll say like 20, what was it, 2010, 2011,
Yep.
something like that. You know everything you know now, 14 or so years later. What would you go back and tell yourself if you could?
So many things.
Write yourself a book.
Yeah, I mean, okay, if we think about what are the things that made the biggest impact, or like, what's the 50-yard bomb down the field versus just running the ball for 2 or 3 yards at a time? I would think that getting the help of coaches, of mentors, of joint venture partners, like having a system and a template to follow. Like, I don't think I would have had the cojones to attempt to buy a $2 million deal if I didn't have those things. And I didn't find a group like the one that we're in to, help me see, wow, deal after deal after deal where they're buying these strip malls and they're doubling the value. Like this, if they can do it, maybe I can do it. Like that helped to build the confidence. And so it's like so often like a mental or a limiting belief, or just not even like having knowledge or exposure to this commercial business for 3 or 4 years until I was in my real estate journey. Like, went to plenty of meetup groups, plenty of real estate clubs, read a lot of books, but it was all residential centric. And I'm like, wait, like, what if I had gotten into commercial in the beginning? Like, can you imagine in like your 20s, you buy one of these and now a decade later, it's maybe almost paid off, and it's doubled in value. And at the rate that we're just printing money, I wish probably that I would have bought as much as I possibly could and held on to as much as I could and locked in as much 4% rate debt as I could over long term, like steady excuse me, stable fixed rate debt with long maturity, get into as much debt as I possibly could. I mean, that's a crazy thing to say. Imagine saying that to your family at the kitchen table. I'm trying to get into as much debt as I can because I'm going to be able to pay it off some years down the road with these Zimbabwe dollars that are worth so much less than they used to be worth because we just keep printing money. So I love that we got into this fixed asset game, and that we can force appreciation and create value in these ways. Uh, I would say the skills of finding deals and raising capital were invaluable. Get really good at those things. You can pay people a relatively nominal amount of money to do almost everything else. But if I can buy a deal for half of what it's going to be worth and then execute that lease up plan, and if I can, get into a nice rhythm with some country club money, some friends and family, like I can just go buy 100 million, 200, $300 million worth of real estate with a team of 3 or 4 people. I mean, that's a bananas thing to think about. But we've got guys in our group that are doing that in all different asset classes and all different markets around the country. So start as early as you can, and figure out what are those limiting beliefs. Is it a lack of knowledge? Is it a lack of confidence? And like, let's address them. And I think I talked to a lot of our, maybe newer members of the group or the people who are trying to do their first deal. It's like, well, are you putting the offers out? Are you sitting down and talking with friends and family about, your plan to buy money? Are you putting yourself in a position, to find a deal like this consistently and systematically and over again? So that was a rant and a ramble, but there might have been a few little gems in there.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on Commercial Academy, and you're going to be there in San Diego. I will not be at that one. What are the dates for that one?
Yeah, I want to say October 11th, 12th, and 13th. It'll be a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So, that's a great environment. We do it in a ballroom live, and a lot of our active members come there just to hang out with each other, to joint venture on the next deal. But then we have a lot of folks just getting exposed to the business, and they're learning about some of the fundamentals. So, I say we teach people how to find deals, fund deals, and then force appreciation into them. And that's all markets and all asset classes. A lot of the principles that we've talked about today in retail apply just as well to apartments, to small bay warehouses, to self-storage, to giant Amazon warehouses. The same philosophies can apply.
Is there a website or contact info you might like to share about getting in touch with you, or kind of getting on your radar for deal flow, things of that nature?
Yeah, so I tend to work mostly with folks that I've got longstanding relationships with, but I've set up SeanKatona.com as kind of a wait list for people who might be interested in seeing my next deal or possibly participating in that. Those folks should be accredited, and we have an existing relationship there. Simplified Properties is where I put some of our current projects up. So that's a little bit more of a quote credibility packet. It's got things that would resonate with a broker or a banker. It's got our buying criteria up there. And then from an education standpoint, I'd point them to Commercial Academy, because you can see both the in-person events and then the virtual events that are on the calendar. So if you're in the SoCal or Southwest area, that San Diego event's right around the corner, which could be fun. But we're doing those quarterly, and they're starting to become hopefully even more frequent. And we're looking at doing virtual formats as well, so we can access even more people who might not want to travel or have the time to carve out 3 or 4 days in a ballroom.
Yeah, for sure. My final question I ask every guest, Sean, what is the kindest thing anyone has ever done for you?
Golly, that's a cool question. I- I- so I just celebrated my 40th birthday, and my wife threw what was more like a wedding than a birthday down in Cabo. And we just stayed at this ridiculous villa and had these beautiful dinners and one of the fun things that we kind of do with our intimate friend group is it's like a friendly roast. And we go around the horn and everyone just kind of shares like a favorite aspect or moment or memory about, you or, your relationship together. And so that's like an overwhelming thing where you just, you got a dozen of the people that you love and respect the most, just like pouring some really heartfelt things into you. So that will lift you up and stick with you for a while. And then she went to the length of making a book
Oh,
that
wow.
it was like letters that people had written to me, and I was like, wow, like I was literally in tears
Hmm.
like reading through that because it was so sweet and so thoughtful. So that's a tough one to top, but you know I will flip over to a professional thing for a moment too and say, working with a coach and a mentor um, is something that, not look, I write a check for it every year because I get that much value out of it. But I've become extremely close friends with a lot of guys in our group. I describe them now as like big brothers, big sisters, and they have been there for me in those really challenging like troughs where I'm just like I am at my breaking point, with this Dollar Tree deal and having somebody who's been through it before who can kind of talk you down and say, look, like at the end of the day, like we're going to make it through this. There's still other solutions. Like, have you considered this? Have you considered that? Like when you're at your lowest low and you've got somebody or a group of people who can help uplift you, navigate those challenging things, you wonder, could I have made it through there without some of those people? And
Hmm.
so those moments have been really powerful and really special. And credit to Scott for putting that group together and just the incredible crew of people that we've met in there, and people that have stuck with it through the years. So those two things come to mind: the fun personal side and the like crazy professional side, and very high highs and low lows on both.
Very cool. Very cool. Sean, I got pages of notes. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on our show.
Awesome. It was a pleasure, Dan. Thank you. I hope everyone got a little gem or nugget out of that. And we appreciate the awesome work you're doing here, just spreading the gospel and the love and touching all the folks out there who listen and watch the show. I know how much work it is and how long you've been at it. And so to have someone at your level of success carving out time to do this is special. It's admirable, and that doesn't go unnoticed. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Sean.
Take care.